Now that we have all the parts cut out, it is time to fix these remaining tabs. Using a scalpel or a dedicated scraper tool is what I typically use first when there's a lot of excess plastic to remove. This is an incredibly awkward process, but what I recommend doing is taking both parts, specifically the knife, and holding it in a clenched fist with the sharp part of the blade facing away from you, with no fingers protruding out of the item you're shaving. Because your fist is clenched, this means you have less range of motion, meaning you are less likely to slip, but even if you do, the blade cannot travel far. Personally, I find this the safest way to do this, however it is still quite cumbersome to get used to. I would reiterate, do not cut towards yourself. If you're under the appropriate age, I would do this with the supervision of an adult. Another technique you can use is scraping, which means to lightly drag the blade across the surface. This often can leave uneven and wavy lines, though sometimes these wavy lines are desirable, not very often. The next step is to further smoothen the surface down. For this part, it doesn't matter too much, as these parts won't be seen, however it's always good practice to do it anyway, as it may affect how some parts fit together. So the options I have for sanding are 1. Sanding sticks, 2. Wet and dry paper, and 3. Files. Sanding sticks, which I'm using now, are good for general purpose. They have a flat surface that has a slight bit of flex. This is very good at jobs like this, however they are fairly expensive for what they are. Wet and dry paper is cheaper, you can get an awful lot of it for your money, and you can put them in a block to create a flat surface. However, this doesn't work quite as well as an actual sanding stick. They are also good for curved surfaces as they are very flexible. I would recommend wet and dry for beginners as they have a very good price to usefulness mark. Files are reasonably cheap considering they last a very long time. They're also very rigid and are good for inside curves. However, they tend to only come in quite coarse options. You can get finer ones, but then oh no, you've got 100 of the things and they've run out of room, and then you spend 2 hours looking for the right one. While using most wet and dry and sanding sticks, you'll see a number on it, somewhere. This is called the grit. The higher the number, the smoother it is. Why is it that way around? Who knows, just is. This is universal. Belt sanders, orbital sanders all use the grit system. The 3 sticks I'm using here have 2 sides with different grit on. One is 1000 and 600, which is for finer sanding and coarse polishing. One is 240 and 400 for more general purpose sanding, and one is 80 and 60, which is more for descaling bricks, so we probably won't use that one here. All I do is gently swipe the part a few times, check to see if it's flush or uneven on one side. If it is poking out on one side, you try to adjust the angle of your swipe to be parallel to the part. Once it's close to being flush, or seams it but with a slight visible ridge, switch to a higher, smoother grit and repeat the process. Eventually it will be completely flush. This is a part that takes a lot of patience. The higher the grit, the more swipes it will take before you notice the difference. You just have to trust that sanding it is doing its job. When you start getting to 2000 plus grit, this is just polishing the item. You won't likely notice any difference other than the part becoming shinier. Different materials will probably require different grits and more passes, and likewise more patience. Sanding a metal part, say, would probably need the same levels of grit but many more passes to get the desired effect. But these kinds of situations will be dealt with when we arrive at them. Dry, or test fitting, is a technique we utilise to make sure we're taking the right direction. It's essentially an insurance policy to make sure we aren't making any mistakes. All it involves is putting parts together as the instructions tell you to, but without any glue. Why? Well, there's a few reasons. As discussed before, not every instruction book is perfect. It may be that putting 2 parts together blocks access to a part that needs painting first. It may be the instructions show you to put a piece together backwards. I've had that before. It may be you can no longer fit a piece from the next step together because of this. It may also be that the parts aren't moulded very well, or they have been warped with age, and one piece needs adjusting before fitting, or As we've just done, we may have forgotten or not adequately removed a tab, meaning the part won't fit correctly, though generally you'll be okay, it's just good practice to do it anyway. Well, that's all we have for this episode. I'm going to fast forward the footage so you can see the work as I'm doing it, though at 6 times speed. You might find it helpful, you might not. Here at times you can see that I am breaking the number one rule and I am cutting towards myself. The reason I'm doing this is because the part is so small that I only need the lightest touch to take off the excess plastic. Because of my relative experience, I am relatively dexterous with the knife. Because of this and my experience, I'm quite confident that I'm not going to slip, and even if I do, that I'm not putting enough pressure on the blade that it will cut through the gloves or my skin. That said, I would still be very cautious if you're going to do this, especially as a beginner. Well, there we are. I hope you took some useful knowledge from this on what tools we use to sand and how and when. I hope I'll catch you on the next one. Toodly pips!